My Hero Academia began its serialized publication in Shonen Jump on July 7, 2014, quickly became entrenched as the new pillar that would hold the magazine up. One could argue that while Luffy and One Piece were the definitive flagships of the magazine, Deku took his place alongside Luffy, forming the magazine's Big Two flagship series. But all things must come to an end, and recently the 306th chapter was entitled The Final Act Begins. So it seems that while the end isn't quite here, it'll be coming sooner than later. So I'd like to take this time to reflect on how we might see things play out in the big final arc as Horikoshi begins to move things towards the end, especially with the incredibly huge status appeal we've seen happen in the world of MHA. So let's take a deep dive as we break down what's going down and what we might see in the future and how things will play out in the end of My Hero Academia. You gotta love to be gone back yet. So from a storytelling perspective, things are at a very interesting point in My Hero. The Paranormal Liberation War arc has created a tremendous societal upheaval in the My Hero universe. Be warned, if you're not current in the manga, we will be talking about a lot of spoilers, but basically to recap, just about every pro-hero and student combined forces to attack Shigaraki's newly formed army and institute the biggest hero raid in the entire series. While technically the heroes won, it was a Pyrrhic victory at best. The collateral damage was so incalculable, with cities shredded apart and many villains escaping, including most importantly the newly powered Shigaraki and his mentor All For One. Plus, with the release of Dabi's hit piece video, public confidence in heroes is at an all-time low. Many heroes just flat out quit and gave up. It just wasn't worth it anymore. And now the world has descended back into the darkness where citizens are forced to take refuge in designated shelters offered at the various hero schools. So what few heroes are left can better protect them. But outside of these designated safe zones, it is chaos and anarchy. Citizens are taking the law into their own hands, using equipment to defend themselves. Villains are running around rampaging, and amidst all this, Deku is left behind his Hero Academia for good to pursue a new path as a dark lone vigilante. Gone are the days of him being a nice boy who smiled and wanted to help save and protect other people. Instead, he is a solitary figure, largely working alone in an increasingly hostile and bitter world. It's a radically different setup from anything we've seen before in My Hero, and I personally love it. You could argue that it's super emo for Deku to go all Harry Potter and leave behind the safety of UA to become a lone superhero. But because Shigaraki now has All For One's power, he also has access to a search quirk that All For One stole on his behalf, which means Shigaraki can find him at any time he pleases. So no matter where Deku is, he'll always be putting his friends and family in danger. So he must take the true path of a vigilante and go out into the untamed concrete jungle to find Shigaraki before Shigaraki eventually comes to find him. With this new status quo also comes a new costume, reflecting his new role as a dark protector. And so My Hero enters its last act. It's a dark dystopian vision, which stands in direct contrast to the bright, cheerful series we started out in. And now Deku has evolved into probably the most American incarnation of a superhero. He's largely alone, not connected with his school or classmates. His newly unlocked quirks have basically given him the power set of Spider-Man. Horikoshi has always been a big Spider-Man fan, so it shouldn't be surprising that he's used his quirk toolbox of the previous wielders of One For All to essentially give Deku all of the abilities of the radioactive arachnid. Think about it. He's got super strength, his black whip is Spider-Man's webbing, danger sense is basically spider sense. He's got everything that's existed in the Spider-Man toolkit of superherodom, plus a few extra skills like the ability to glide and produce a smoke screen. Horikoshi's been building up to this point to transform Deku into Spider-Man. What's also very interesting is how he's emulating the darker elements from classic superhero stories in his final arc. Horikoshi gave an interesting answer during an interview when he was asked about doing a time skip, saying, "I also want to focus on their life as an adult at some point. I want to touch upon stories akin to something American superheroes do. Some of my favorite stories are when Peter Parker accidentally caused Mary Jane to die, giving her cancer due to prolonged exposure to radioactivity in his semen. When you're an adult, even as a hero, you're likely to be exposed to something like drugs, alcohol, and sex. That's the kind of coming-of-age storyline I want to be able to tell in the future." While I don't know if I'd be as bold to call this a time jump, I do think the darker tone fits in terms of what he said he wanted to do in the past. Although I don't think Deku is going to use his super all-for-one semen to kill Ochika, like Spider-Man accidentally did in the infamous Reign storyline. But you can see a lot of parallels from some famous comic book storylines, chief among them the famous Batman Cataclysm and No Man's Land arcs. In Batman Cataclysm, a huge earthquake hits Gotham, completely devastating it, which is made worse thanks to the lethal virus that's managed to spread in the previous Batman story, Contagion. This leads to a breakdown of law and order that gets so bad the US government blows up all the bridges to Gotham, disconnecting it from the rest of the world, turning it into an apocalyptic Mad Max wasteland, where the city is carved up and ruled by different supervillain gangs. This era was chronicled in the long-running story arc No Man's Land, which you might be a bit familiar with since it was used as the inspiration for The Dark Knight Rises, when Gotham is cut off from the rest of the world thanks to Bane. The My Hero universe isn't far off from being a literal no man's land, seeing how outside of the few sheltered areas centered around the hero schools, the rest of the world is basically a lawless zone where citizens and villains alike go wild with their quirks without any kind of repercussion and regulation. It's in this new status quo that Deku is left behind the quaint constraints of his hero academia and is now operating more as a traditional vigilante American superhero. What I've always seen is the big difference between shonen stories and American superhero stories is that usually shonen characters operate within an institution, whereas most American superheroes operate alone with the individual set of powers based around their origin. So like Naruto is part of the Leaf Village where he operates with other ninjas, Tanjiro is a part of the Demon Slayer Corps, Yuji goes to the Tokyo Metropolitan Curse Technical School or Tokyo Jujutsu High. All these characters are basically superheroes, but they don't feel like superheroes because they live in a fantasy universes where no one really has a secret identity or fights crime because their fantasy profession of choice is just a part of the fabric of their universe. Versus something like Batman or Spider-Man where occasionally they might team up with other superheroes or hero teams like the Justice League or Avengers. But they largely work independently and don't aspire to become the greatest Batman or Spider-Man because they operate completely alone without any kind of bureaucratic structure they can rise up in. Deku used to operate on shonen principles by fighting against rivals and other hero highs as well as his own class, hoping to make it to the pro status and eventually on the Japanese hero billboard charts, but now he is largely alone. Well, not entirely alone, he is collaborating with other top heroes and All Might, is now basically kinda like his Alfred, coming out in what I can only assume is like the MHA universe of the Batmobile to bring Deku snacks as he roams around a devastated cityscape to find Shigaraki and One for All before they can find him. It's a radical new status quo and I admire the balls of Horikoshi in terms of how much he's shaken up his universe from what we've seen previously. Horikoshi has said he wanted to end the series at volume 30, and we're at that point and MHA still has a lot to wrap up before it reaches its final conclusion. If I had to guess, I think we'll see things go to maybe chapter 400, and assumingly the series could go on longer if there's a more formal time jump, but the guy's tired. He's been plus ultraing at the art for a long time now. While everything in the war arc was phenomenal, you can't help but feeling that he's looking to wrap things up so he can enjoy a nice long sabbatical instead of being stuck in the death march of always producing 19 pages weekly. We've seen delays, we've seen incomplete manga chapters due to the deadlines. Let's face it, not everyone is going to be born with the superhuman manga genes of Ichiro Oda, who's been going for 20 plus years and consistently putting out great art. Sometimes you just need to bring things to a close. Sure, after the storyline with One for All and Shigaraki is over, it could go on. Maybe there could be a more formal time jump and we can get to see the cast as adults working as sidekicks, or forming their own hero agencies, or teaching the next class of UA. There are many ways Horikoshi can milk this series if he desires, but it feels like we're in the endgame now. But as dark as things might seem with a super moody Deku seemingly having abandoned all of his friends and family behind as he goes on a single-minded crusade to capture Shigaraki and All for One, aided by only the vestige spirits of his predecessors, Deku must finally shoulder the burden of his inheritance alone. One thing I do like is the few moments of levity and light. So in the most recent chapter, as of the time of this writing, there's this little moment I love. A giant monster girl is wandering the darkened streets and she is attacked by a self-appointed vigilante thinking she's a threat. But then Deku appears to save the day and comes to her rescue, and there's just this charming little moment where he's floating in the air holding an umbrella, offering the beleaguered gigantic monster girl a little bit of comfort in a dark stormy night. It's that sort of magical realism you see in Miyazaki movies, like an inverted but much more gentle version of the Western comic trope of a woman being assaulted by evil molesters in a dark alley, but filtered through the Eastern prism. I really love this panel a lot. I think it's a delicate tonal balance, and if Horikoshi can maintain this through the rest of the final arc, then I think we're in for something very special. Hopefully when we see it animated, Studio Bones can adjust their art style to fit a new aesthetic, but I think this shakeup is one that was needed, and one that will help breathe new life into MHA as it enters its final stage, and ultimately prepares to make its final bow before exiting onto the stage of legends. Until its warm corpse gets milked for spin-offs eternally like the rotting corpse of Naruto. But for now, let's just look at things positively. So far, the final arc is shaping up great, and we'll talk more about it whenever Season 6 of the anime hits, because that's it. My Hero Month is Done. And with that, I bring My Hero Month to a close. I hope you enjoyed the 2021 of My Hero Month. Of course, you can relive it by watching the videos on the My Hero Month playlist, buy the nice shirts, or sub to my channel. And now, the moment you've all been waiting for. The official winner of the first ever Lobster Magnet art contest is... absolutely no one. None of you entered. I kind of had a feeling this would happen, but I wanted to try it out anyway. But I guess I'm the winner, because since none of you entered, I win by default. And don't have to pay you anything, and don't have to pay out a prize. So, you know, if you just sent anything, you would have qualified. But you didn't, so there you go. I'm the winner. Wish it would have been different, but can't win them all. Hopefully, maybe next My Hero Month, someone will actually submit something. But, yeah, the first annual My Hero Month fan art contest is a complete wash. A special thank you to all the vigilante heroes on my Patreon fighting the good fight in the mean streets of the post-apocalypse. Carla Hoffman, Eric Duhane, Agiv1, Shonen Ronan, Bari, Walking the Steps, Joseph Malty, and Aaron Tony. Hopefully in your efforts, you can finally bring All for One to justice. So that brings this year's My Hero Month to a close. See ya whenever My Hero begins its 6th season in 2022 or 2023.